Hey guys, Crystal Thompson here for Simon Says Stamp. Today's reveal is Picket Fence, and we are using the beautiful Shake Your Flake this season, which is a larger stamp with snowmen and some beautiful unseen sentiments. We are going to use the snowman and the doggy, and look how pretty that is. We're going to be using some clean color markers along with watercolor paper, the Simon Says embossing ink, and black embossing powder. We're going to stamp everything on fog, and then we're going to use Blue Jay and Malibu for embellishment. So let's get started. We're going to begin by stamping one of the snowmen, and I thought the snowman looked particularly friendly, and we're going to stamp him on fog, and fog's just a really nice gray. And I am using dye inks, so these inks will bleed when you put the watercolor. So we are going to do some very fun techniques, and it's going to look like we drew this because we're going to outline it with watercolor after we color it. We're going to add the little pooch. Don't worry that the arm is kind of touching the little dog because you won't see it. All right, I'm going to move on to grab the line. So this line is going to be for the snowbanks or the snow kills. We're going to add more of that fog. We're going to do several. We're going to do 2 or 3 on the right and 2 or 3 on the left. And we don't want them to be completely even. We want them to do different layers. And that way it looks like we have multiple banks of snow. So it's a very pretty light gray that we are ready to watercolor. So I'm going to bring in my clean color markers, and I'm going to start with the very lightest blue, and I'm going to begin the shading of the snowmen and of the snowbanks. One of my biggest suggestions is do not use too much water and make sure that your items are dry if you're coloring things that are right next to each other. So next we're going to move on to a red, and it actually kind of turned out pink once we added the water, but that's okay. We're going to continue layering. Do not continue layering if it starts to bleed, and the reason why is just going to continue to bleed. So let it dry and then come back to continue layering. We're going to add a little bit of blush, and now we're going to begin with that blue scarf. It took me about 28 minutes to watercolor this card, hence why I'm speeding it up. So honestly, I love doing watercolors this way, and the reason why is that when you are shading, you're still using the same color, even though it looks like different colors, but it's beautiful because it gradients and then it blends very nicely. So I'm going to color my little dog. I'm going to clean my block, and then I'm going to grab more of that red and come back to the little hat. We're going to color in the buttons. So as you can see, we're starting to lose our image, and that's okay. So I'm going to grab some black. Again, I'm going to grab a very fine brush, and we are going to start brushing the outline. Make sure that it is dry where you are outlining, or you will lose your image. And see how fun that looks? It looks like we drew it, and I ended up just redrawing the snowman's hand so it's not on the little dog's face. So we're going to continue that. That looks really pretty. Now we're going to add 3 shades of blue, and we are going to begin adding the background blue for the sky. And if you allow these watercolors to dry in between layers, you're going to get that beautiful watercolor look with different layers and different blues, and it just makes it super, super pretty. Grab a paper towel and dry up your image. Okay, I'm going to grab more blue, add more water, and then I'm going to come back with my marker, add a couple more details. I felt it was too wet, so I grabbed my heat embosser and just dried it up a little more. Then I come back and add more layers to that sky and that snow. Just do a little bit of flickering and be careful not to bleed. All right, once that is completely dried, we are going to use the bold sentiment freezing with my buddies, which is totally appropriate, right? And I just loved because I wanted to do soft and bold. So the bold's going to be the sentiment. So we're going to rock that up with that embossing ink. We're going to grab our black embossing powder. Make sure you remove any little remnants because they will show up on this soft watercolor. And then we're going to heat emboss. And I've had my heat gun preheating, so it goes pretty quick. All right, now we're going to begin doing some of the background stamping. Again, using Blue Jay and Malibu, we're going to stamp the snowflakes included in the stamp set, be sure that your watercolor is completely dry or you will lose the image and you will see it starting to bleed. So I didn't want it to be too dark and I didn't want to take away from the softness of the watercolor. So I kind of moved on to that mallet blue and did more of that light teal coloring. Instead of stamping, you can totally do some sequins or some Nouveau drops, but I felt like we just wanted to keep this one layer and not take away from that watercolor image that looks like we drew it, right? Okay, we're going to begin assembling a card. We're going to keep it one layer. So I'm going to grab some roller tape from Tombow, and I'm going to be sure to add lots of it and add it close to the edge because this is watercolor cardstock. It tends to roll and we don't want any of that. We're going to place it right in the center and we're going to mat it against that white, and it's going to continue to look very nice and very clean, and it is ready to be mailed. That does it. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is Crystal Thompson. We did some loose watercolors using the Picket fence Simon Says Stamp exclusive. Have an awesome day.